The Velith had never known true darkness until the day the sky burned red ambassador. Talora stood at the observation window of Orbital Station 7, her 4 eyes wide with horror as she watched her beautiful world die below her. The soft blue oceans that had cradled her people for 12,000 cycles were now black with ash and the green. Forests that stretched across 3 continents had become nothing more than smoking ruins. She pressed her webbed hands against the cold glass and felt her twin hearts beating so fast she thought they might burst from her chest. How many? She whispered to the station commander beside her. Commander Velis could not meet her gaze. His voice cracked as he answered. 17 billion souls were on the surface when the swarm arrived. We have confirmed contact with underwater sanctuaries, holding perhaps 2 billion survivors. But the numbers drop every hour. Talora closed her eyes and remembered Velithos Prime as it had been just 30 cycles ago. It had been a paradise world with gentle rains and warm sunshine, and cities that floated on crystal-clear lakes. Her people had spent thousands of years building a civilization based on art and music and philosophy. They had never needed weapons because they had never known enemies. They had never built warships because they had never imagined war. The Velith were a peaceful species with soft bodies and fragile bones and minds that could not comprehend violence. They had joined the Galactic Council 5,000 years ago and had believed themselves safe under its protection. They had been so foolish the Craxian swarm had appeared without warning. One day the skies were clear, and the next day they were filled with millions of biomechanical horrors that fell upon the planet like a plague of locusts. The swarm did not negotiate or demand surrender. They simply consumed everything in their path with claws and teeth, and Acidalora had sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council the moment the attack began. She had begged for help from the consortium of 12 and pleaded with the elder races and called upon every treaty and alliance the Velith had ever signed. The responses had been the same. From every species in the galaxy, we express our deepest sympathy for your situation. The Craxian swarm is too powerful for direct confrontation. We will accept Velith refugees at our border stations. May the stars guide your spirits to peace. Empty words from cowards who hid behind their own borders while her people screamed and died. The Galactic Council had existed for over 100,000 years, and it included thousands of species from across the known universe. They had rules and laws and procedures for everything. They had committees that studied problems and councils that debated solutions and assemblies that voted on actions that never actually happened. But they had no soldiers. They had no warriors. They had no one willing to fight. Every species in the council had evolved on gentle worlds with stable climates and abundant food. They had developed intelligence through cooperation rather than competition. Violence was alien to them in every sense of the word. The very concept of organized warfare made them physically ill. The Craxian swarm knew this, and they used it. They moved from system to system and devoured entire civilizations while the galaxy watched and did nothing. No one had ever stopped them because no one had ever tried. Laura turned away from the window because she could not bear to watch any longer. She walked through the crowded corridors of the station where thousands of refugees huddled together in fear. Children cried for parents they would never see again, and elders stared at nothing with empty eyes. She made her way to the communications center where a young technician named Sorrel worked frantically at his console. "Ambassador," he said without looking up, "I have scanned every frequency and contacted every system within range. There is no help coming. The nearest council fleet is 40 cycles away, and they have already said they will not engage the swarm." Talora felt despair crushing her chest like a physical weight. She had failed her people. She had spent her entire life as a diplomat, believing that words could solve any problem. And now she understood how wrong she had been. Some problems could not be talked away. Some enemies could not be reasoned with. What about the quarantine systems? She asked, grasping at any possibility no matter how small. Sorel hesitated before answering. Ambassador, those systems are restricted for good reason. The species that evolved there are considered too dangerous for contact. Show me the list. The young technician pulled up a holographic display that showed a map of the local galactic arm. Red markers indicated dozens of systems that had been placed under quarantine by the Council. Most were dead worlds filled with toxic atmospheres or extreme radiation. But one marker caught Telora's attention. What is Sol 3? She asked. Sorel's face went pale. That is a Class 12 Death World, Ambassador. The most dangerous classification in the entire database. The planet has extreme temperature variations that range from frozen wastelands to boiling deserts. It experiences constant tectonic activity and volcanic eruptions. The atmosphere is filled with a corrosive gas called oxygen, and the native life forms are apex predators that have been killing each other for billions of years. But there is intelligent life there? Yes, Sorel admitted reluctantly. A species called humans. They somehow evolved on that nightmare world and survived long enough to develop technology. The Council placed them under quarantine 10,000 years ago because they were considered too unpredictable and too violent for integration into galactic society. Telora studied the data on the display, and what she saw made her blood run cold. The humans were persistence predators who chased their prey for hours until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had evolved the ability to heal from wounds that would kill any other species. They consumed toxic substances for pleasure, and they had domesticated apex predators to serve as companions. But what truly terrified her was their history. The humans had fought wars against each other that killed hundreds of millions of their own kind. They had developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single flash of light. They had poisoned their own planet and driven countless species to extinction through sheer negligence. They were monsters. By any galactic standard, but monsters were exactly what she needed. Open a channel to Sol 3. Telora commanded. Sorel stared at her in disbelief. Ambassador, contact with that system is forbidden by Council law. If we reach out to the humans, we could face sanctions and exile, and look out that window, Telora interrupted him, her voice sharp with grief and anger. Tell me what sanctions matter when our world is already dead. Tell me what laws matter when our children are being eaten alive. The Council has abandoned us, and the galaxy has turned its back. If the humans are the only ones who might help, then I will beg monsters for salvation. She took control of the communications console herself and began composing a message. She did not use diplomatic language or formal protocols. She simply told the truth. This is Ambassador Telora of the Velith Collective. We are dying. Our world is being destroyed by an enemy we cannot fight. We have asked the entire galaxy for help, and no one has answered. You are our last hope, please. If there is any mercy in your hearts, help us. She broadcast the message on every frequency she could reach, and then she waited. The response came 17 hours later, and it was not what she expected. It was not a formal diplomatic communication or a bureaucratic rejection. It was a simple message in a language her translator could barely process. We received your transmission. Help is on the way. Hold on. Telora read those words again and again. She did not know if she should feel hope or terror. The Deathworlders were coming, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. The message arrived on Earth at 3 a.m. Geneva time, and within 6 hours, every government on the planet knew that humanity was not alone in the universe. General Yuki Tanaka stood before the emergency session of the United Nations and watched as world leaders struggled to process what they had just learned. Some were excited and some were terrified, and some simply sat in stunned silence with their mouths hanging open. "Let me summarize what we know," Tanaka said, her voice calm and steady despite the chaos around her. "Approximately 18 hours ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an alien transmission. The message was a plea for help from a species called the Velith. Their homeworld is under attack by a hostile force known as the Craxian Swarm, and they face complete extinction within weeks." The Secretary General raised his hand. "General Tanaka, how do we know this is not some kind of hoax or test?" "Because the transmission included data about our own solar system that no human organization possesses," Tanaka replied. "And because our astronomers have now confirmed the existence of artificial structures in the regions of space described in the message. This is real. Aliens exist, and they are asking us for help." Murmurs rippled through the assembly hall as delegates whispered to each other in dozens of languages. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about and feared for centuries. First contact with extraterrestrial life. But it was not the first contact anyone had imagined. "There is more," Tanaka continued. "The transmission included fragments of what appears to be a galactic database. According to this information, Earth has been under quarantine for approximately 10,000 years. We have been deliberately isolated from the rest of the galaxy." "Isolated?" the Chinese delegate demanded. "By whom and for what reason?" Tanaka took a deep breath before answering. "By an organization called the Galactic Council. And the reason is us. Humanity has been classified as a Class 12 Deathworld species. Too dangerous and too violent for contact with galactic civilization." She activated a holographic display that showed the data recovered from the alien transmission. Gasps filled the room as the delegates read the galactic assessment of their planet and their species. Earth was described as a nightmare world of extreme conditions. The temperature variations alone would kill most galactic species within hours. The tectonic instability and volcanic activity made the surface unpredictable and dangerous. The high oxygen atmosphere was classified as corrosive and toxic, and the native life forms were described as universally hostile. But the assessment of humanity itself was even more disturbing. Humans were classified as persistent predators, a rare and terrifying type of hunter that did not rely on speed or strength, but on endurance. They would chase their prey for hours or even days until the target collapsed from exhaustion. No other known intelligent species had evolved this hunting strategy. Humans had also evolved an extraordinary ability to heal from injuries. Wounds that would kill other species outright were merely inconvenient to humans. They could lose limbs and survive. They could suffer massive trauma and recover. They could even remove parts of their own organs and continue living. And then there were the cultural observations. Humans consumed neurotoxins recreationally and called them alcohol and caffeine. They ate capsaicin, a chemical weapon used by plants to prevent consumption, and called it delicious. They kept apex predators like wolves and large cats as household companions. They engaged in activities that simulated combat and near-death experiences for entertainment. The Galactic Database concluded with a simple warning: avoid contact with Sol-3 at all costs. The inhabitants are unpredictable, resilient, and capable of extreme violence. No diplomatic solution is possible with a species that glorifies warfare. Assembly Hall was silent for a long moment. Then the delegate from Nigeria began to laugh. "They think we are monsters," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The entire galaxy is afraid of us." "That appears to be correct," Tanaka confirmed. "Every other intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on worlds they call paradise planets. Stable climates and gentle environments and abundant resources. They never needed to fight for survival the way we did. They never developed the capacity for organized violence. The very concept of war is alien to them, which is why they cannot help the Velith. The Russian delegate said slowly, understanding dawning on his face. They have no soldiers. They have no weapons. They have no one willing to fight. Exactly, Tanaka said. The Craxian swarm has been destroying civilizations for thousands of years, and no one has ever stopped them because no one has ever tried. The galaxy is full of peaceful species who have no idea how to defend themselves. The American delegate leaned forward. And what exactly are these Craxians? Tanaka changed the display to show the limited data available about the enemy. The images were disturbing. The Craxians were biomechanical horrors that combined organic tissue with metallic components. They functioned as a hive mind controlled by massive queen organisms. They did not negotiate or communicate. They simply consumed everything they encountered. They are predators. Tanaka said simply, but unlike us, they have never faced another predator. They have never fought anything that could fight back. The assembly hall erupted in debate. Some delegates argued that humanity should stay hidden and avoid drawing attention to itself. Others insisted that the quarantine proved the galaxy saw humans as enemies. A few suggested that this was all some elaborate trap designed to lure humanity into a conflict. But one voice rose above the others, the delegate from Kenya. A woman named Amara Okonkwo stood and addressed the assembly with quiet dignity. I have listened to all of your concerns, and I understand the fear. But I cannot stop thinking about the message we received. A people we have never met, separated from us by distances we can barely comprehend, sent a cry for help into the void of space. They had no reason to believe anyone would answer. They had no hope left except the desperate chance that someone, somewhere, might care enough to try. She paused and looked around the room. We have spent our entire history fighting each other. We have killed millions of our own kind in wars over land and resources and ideology. We have done terrible things that we can never undo. But we have also done something else. We have helped strangers. We have risked our lives for people we did not know. We have sent aid across oceans and borders when disasters struck nations that were once our enemies. Her voice grew stronger. The galaxy calls us monsters because we know how to fight. But fighting is not all we know. We also know how to protect. We know how to defend the helpless. We know that the strong have a duty to stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. That is not monstrous. That is human. The room fell silent. We have been given a chance. Amara continued, a chance to show the galaxy what humanity truly is. Not the savages they fear, but the guardians they need. We can turn away and hide behind our quarantine. Or we can answer the call and prove that our capacity for violence is matched by our capacity for compassion. She sat down and the vote was called. It was unanimous within 72 hours. The newly formed Terran Defense Coalition had assembled the largest military force in human history. 12 carrier ships retrofitted for interstellar travel, using technology reverse-engineered from the alien data. 40,000 volunteers from every nation on Earth. Soldiers and doctors and engineers and pilots. Anyone with skills that might help General Tanaka address the fleet before departure. You are about to do something no human has ever done. You will travel beyond our solar system and fight an enemy we have never faced. You will represent our entire species to civilizations that have feared us for 10,000 years. Remember who you are. Remember why you fight. Not for conquest or glory, but because someone asked for help and we answered. The ships launched into the darkness between stars and humanity, took its first step into a galaxy that had tried so hard to keep them out. The monsters were coming, but they were coming to save, not to destroy. Ambassador Telora had spent 17 days preparing herself for the arrival of the humans, and she had convinced herself that she was ready to face whatever emerged from those ships. She was wrong. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the Perefta edge of the Velethos system and immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple and direct in a way that made the Velith communication officers uncomfortable. This is the Terran Defense Coalition responding to your distress call. We are here to help. Please advise on current situation and provide coordinates for landing. No formal greetings. No diplomatic protocols. No lengthy negotiations about terms and conditions. Just straight to business. Delora guided the lead human ship to a landing platform on Orbital Station 7, where a delegation of Velith officials waited to receive their unexpected saviors. She had ordered the platform cleared of refugees and had arranged a proper welcome with ceremonial banners and traditional music. The human dropship was nothing like the elegant vessels of galactic civilization. It was blocky and angular and covered in thick armor plating. It looked like it had been designed to survive a crash rather than to impress anyone. With its beauty, the landing ramp lowered with a heavy metallic clang, and Telora felt her hearts begin to race. The first human to emerge was the largest living creature she had ever seen outside of deep ocean documentation. He stood nearly twice her height, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the light behind him. His skin was a deep brown color, and his head was covered in short black hair. His eyes were forward-facing like a predator's, and they scanned the landing platform with an intensity that made her want to hide. He wore armor that looked like it had been through a dozen wars, scratched and dented and repaired in 100 places. Weapons hung from his belt, and straps crossed his chest. Everything about him radiated danger. Behind him came more humans in an endless stream, male and female in roughly equal numbers. Their skin came in shades ranging from pale pink to deep black. Some had hair on their faces and some did not. Some were heavily muscled and some were lean and wiry. But they all shared the same predatory eyes, and the same confident way of moving. Telora forced herself to step forward. Her legs felt weak and her voice trembled, but she had a duty to perform. "Welcome to what remains of Velith space," she said. "I am Ambassador Telora. On behalf of my people, I thank you for answering our call." The large human in front removed his helmet, and his face transformed in a way that confused her. The corners of his mouth turned upward, and his eyes softened, and suddenly he did not look quite so terrifying. "I am Colonel Marcus Chun of the Terran Defense Coalition," he said. And to her shock, he lowered himself down onto one knee so that his eyes were level with hers. "Ambassador, you are not alone anymore. We came as fast as we could, and we brought everything we have. Tell us what you need, and we will make it happen." Telora felt tears forming in her eyes. She had expected demands or conditions or negotiations. She had prepared herself for the humans to ask what they would receive in return for their help. That was how things worked in the galaxy. Nothing was free. Everything had a price, but this human was kneeling before her like a servant and asking what she needed. "I do not understand," she admitted. "What do you want from us?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Want from you? Ambassador, you asked for help. We are here to help. That is all." One of the Velith officials behind Telora spoke up nervously. "Colonel, our records indicate that humans are a violent and aggressive species. You have fought wars that killed billions of your own kind. Why would you travel across the galaxy to help strangers?" Marcus stood up, and his expression grew serious. "Because someone asked. Because you were suffering, and we could do something about it. Because that is what humans do when they see innocent people being hurt." He gestured to the soldiers behind him. "Every person in this fleet volunteered to be here. They left their families and their homes and risked their lives to help people they have never met. Some of them will die fighting for your world. They know this and they came anyway. But why?" Telora pressed, still unable to comprehend. "Your own records show that you have no alliance with us. No treaties. No obligations. We have nothing to offer you in return." A female human stepped forward. She was smaller than Marcus, but her eyes held the same intensity. Her hair was silver despite her young face, and her voice carried a commanding authority. "My name is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Okonkwo," she said, "and I can answer your question. Humans have a concept that seems to be missing from galactic civilization. We call it conscience. It is the voice inside us that will not let us sleep at night if we know we could have helped someone and chose not to." She pointed toward the viewing window where the burning planet was visible in the distance. "When we received your message, when we saw what was happening to your world, there was never any question about whether we would come. The only question was how fast we could get here. Turning away from suffering is not something humans know how to do." Talora finally began to understand. The galaxy had classified humans as monsters because of their capacity for violence. But that same ferocity that made them terrifying in war also made them fierce in protection. They were not coming to conquer. They were coming to defend. "What do you need to know about the Craxians?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Marcus nodded, and his expression shifted to something cold and focused. "Everything? How they fight, what weapons they use, where their weak points are. We need to understand the enemy before we can destroy them." "Destroy them?" A Valoth official gasped. "The Craxians have never been defeated. They have consumed dozens of civilizations. You cannot possibly think." "We do not think," Marcus interrupted. "We know. We are humans. We have been fighting and killing and surviving since before your species discovered fire. We have faced extinction-level threats on our own world, and we are still here. We have fought enemies that outnumbered us 1,000 to 1, and we have won. The Craxians have never faced anything like us." He turned to address all of the Velith present. "I will not lie to you. This will be hard. People will die on both sides. Your world is heavily damaged, and some of what was lost can never be recovered. But the swarm will be stopped here. They will not take another centimeter of Velith territory. I give you my word as a human and as a soldier." Talora studied his face and saw nothing but absolute conviction. This was not arrogance or bravado. This human genuinely believed that he and his soldiers could defeat an enemy that the entire galaxy feared. "There is something else you should know," Marcus added, his voice softening slightly. "We read the galactic records about ourselves. We know that we have been isolated because the galaxy considers us dangerous and unpredictable. We know that many species see us as monsters." He smiled that strange human smile again. "And maybe they are right. Maybe we are monsters. But monsters have their uses. Sometimes the only thing that can stop a nightmare is something even more frightening. And Ambassador, I promise you this. The Craxian swarm has never encountered anything as frightening as a human who has decided to protect someone they care about." Talora felt something she had not felt since the invasion began. Hope the Deathworlders had arrived, and for the first time in weeks, she believed that her people might actually survive. The Craxian swarm had consumed 37 civilizations across 10,000 years, and they had never experienced anything that could be called resistance. Prey species ran or hid or surrendered or died. They did not fight back. They did not organize defenses. They did not plant explosives in their own cities to destroy advancing swarm forces. The humans changed everything. Colonel Marcus Chun led the first assault wave personally. 300 soldiers in heavy armor dropped from orbit directly onto the largest swarm hive cluster on the northern continent. It was a suicide mission by any galactic standard. The cluster contained over 1 million swarm warriors, and the humans were outnumbered more than 3,000 to 1. The swarm queen who controlled this cluster observed the incoming dropships with something that might have been amusement. She had watched countless species attempt to resist, and every single one had failed. These new creatures would be no different. She was very wrong, though. Human dropships did not land at a safe distance and deploy troops in orderly formations. They crashed directly into the heart of the hive cluster at full speed, and the soldiers inside came out shooting before the dust had settled. Marcus was the first one through the breach. His rifle roared in his hands as he sprayed armor-piercing rounds into the mass of swarm warriors that rushed toward him. Each shot was precise and deadly. Each movement was calculated and efficient. He'd been training for combat since he was 18 years old, and every lesson had prepared him for this moment. "Push forward," he shouted over the chaos. "Keep moving. Do not let them swarm us. Advance, advance, advance." The humans fought like nothing the swarm had ever encountered. They did not hesitate or show fear. They moved in coordinated teams that covered each other with overlapping fields of fire. When one soldier fell, another immediately took their place. They used grenades and rockets and flamethrowers and anything else they could find. A swarm warrior slashed Marcus across the chest with claws that could tear through starship hull plating. Blood sprayed across his visor, but he did not fall. He grabbed the creature by its throat with his free hand and fired point blank into its face with the other. Then he kept moving. The swarm queen watched through the eyes of her warriors and felt an emotion she had never experienced before. Confusion. How were these creatures still alive? The wounds they were suffering should have killed them instantly, but they kept fighting. One human soldier had lost an arm completely and was still firing with the other. Another had taken a claw through the abdomen and was using his own intestines to tie off the wound while providing cover fire for his squad. This was not how prey behaved. This was not how anything behaved. And then things got worse. The humans began to sing it. Started with one soldier, a young woman with bright red hair who just watched her entire squad get torn apart. She should have been traumatized. She should have been broken. Instead, she began to howl a wordless battle cry that was somehow also a melody. Others picked up the sound. Then more, and soon the entire human force was singing as they fought. It was not beautiful music. It was harsh and savage and primal. It was the sound of a species that had been fighting for survival since the first proto-human picked up a rock and bashed it against something that wanted to eat them. The swarm's psychic network recoiled in horror. They had broken the minds of countless species by flooding them with fear and despair. But human minds were impervious. They were already full of chaos. Fear and joy and anger and love and hatred and hope all mixed together in a storm of emotion that no outside force could penetrate. The queen tried to project images of death and destruction into the human consciousness and received something even more disturbing in return. Human memories of their own history. Wars that made the swarm look peaceful by comparison. Plagues that killed hundreds of millions. Natural disasters that leveled entire cities, and through all of it, the humans survived. They rebuilt and recovered and moved forward. They looked at death and laughed and kept going. What kind of madness was this? For 12 straight hours, the battle raged. The humans were taking casualties, but they were inflicting 10 times as many on the swarm. They adapted to every tactic the queen tried. When she sent warriors through underground tunnels, they collapsed the tunnels with explosives. When she tried aerial assaults, they shot her flyers out of the sky. When she concentrated her forces for a massive push, they simply held their ground and piled the bodies so high that new attackers had to climb over the dead lieutenant commander. Sarah Conquil led a flanking attack that punched through to the queen's chamber itself. Her squad was down to 7 soldiers, and all of them were wounded. She had a piece of swarm claw embedded in her thigh, and she had not even paused to remove it. "There," she said, pointing to the massive bloated form of the hive queen. "Cut off the head and the body dies." The queen unleashed everything she had left. Elite warriors bred specifically for her protection. psychic attacks of unprecedented intensity. Even her own massive claws that could crush a human like an insect. Sarah lost 2 more soldiers getting through the guards. She took a psychic blast that would have turned a Velith brain to mush and kept moving. Her nose was bleeding and her vision was blurred, but she kept moving. She reached the queen and looked up at the ancient creature that had consumed billions of innocent lives across thousands of years. On behalf of humanity, she said, raising her weapon. You are done. The queen died screaming in a way that echoed through the entire psychic network. Every swarm warrior on the planet felt her death, and for one frozen moment they all stopped moving. Then Marcus gave the order. All units press the attack. They are confused and afraid. Finish them. The battle turned into a rout. Without the queen's guidance, the warriors fought as individuals rather than as a coordinated force. Humans cut them down by the thousands. Soldiers who had been fighting for over a day without rest found new reserves of energy as they sensed victory. By dawn, the northern hive cluster had been completely destroyed. Over 1 million swarm warriors were dead. Human casualties were 4,000 killed and 6,000 wounded. It was the first time in 10,000 years that the swarm had lost a major engagement, but it was only the beginning. There were 17 more hive clusters across the planet, and 3 hive queens still coordinated the swarm's efforts. For the next 3 weeks, the humans fought battle after battle across the surface of Velithos Prime. They lost soldiers in every engagement, but they never lost a battle. They learned and adapted and improved with every fight. Tactics that worked once were refined, and tactics that failed were abandoned. Marcus led the assault on the western continent personally. He fought for 36 hours straight without sleep or food. When his ammunition ran dry, he killed swarm warriors with his knife. When his knife broke, he killed them with his bare hands. He was wounded 17 times and refused to be evacuated. Sarah coordinated the defense of the underwater sanctuaries where billions of Velith refugees huddled in fear. She turned the ocean itself into a weapon, using pressure waves and temperature differentials to destroy swarm forces that tried to penetrate the deep. The final battle came at the primary hive, Queen's Chamber, deep beneath the southern pole. She was the oldest and most powerful of the queens. She had lived for 8,000 years and consumed more civilizations than any of her sisters. Marcus stood before her with 100 soldiers at his back. All of them were exhausted and wounded and running low on ammunition. The queen spoke directly into his mind. You have fought well, little predator. Better than any prey I have ever encountered. But you cannot win. I have existed for millennia. I have consumed worlds. You are nothing but insects. Marcus smiled that human smile. That is where you are wrong. We are not insects. We are humans. And insects is actually what we call the things we step on without noticing. He raised his weapon and fired. The primary hive queen died harder than any of the others. She killed 20 soldiers before she fell and wounded everyone who survived. But she fell with her death. The remaining swarm forces lost all coordination. They became mindless beasts that were easily hunted down and destroyed. Within 2 days, the last Craxian was dead. Velithos Prime was saved for the first time in 10,000 years. The Craxian swarm had been not just defeated but completely destroyed. The Velith emerged from their sanctuaries to find their world scarred but not dead. And standing guard over everything were the humans. Battered and bloodied and exhausted, but still standing, the monsters had become their saviors. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had stood for over 100,000 years, and in all that time it had never been so silent. 12,000 delegates, representing 8,000 species, sat in perfect stillness as Ambassador Telora of the Velith walked to the central speaking platform. Behind her walked a delegation of humans led by Ambassador Elena Vasquez. And behind them walked Colonel Marcus Chung and the surviving soldiers of the Terran Defense Coalition. The humans looked out of place in the elegant crystal chamber. Their uniforms were plain and functional. Their bodies were scarred, and their eyes held the weight of everything they had seen and done. Several of them were still bandaged from wounds that would have killed any other species in the room. The council president, an ancient being from a species so old that no one remembered their original name, spoke first. Ambassador Talora, you have requested this assembly to address the matter of the Sol 3 quarantine and the recent events in your system. You may speak. Talora stepped forward and looked out at the thousands of faces staring back at her. Most showed fear when they looked at the humans. Some showed disgust. A few showed curiosity. Honored delegates, she began. 37 cycles ago, my world was dying. The Craxian swarm had descended upon Velathos Prime and was systematically destroying everything we had built over 12,000 years. Our cities burned. Our people screamed. Our children were devoured before their parents' eyes. She paused to let her words sink in. I sent pleas for help to every species represented in this chamber. I begged and bargained and promised anything if someone would just help us. Do you remember what you told me? The chamber remained silent. You told me that the swarm was too powerful. You told me that confrontation was impossible. You told me that you would accept refugees at your borders. You told me to accept the death of my entire civilization with dignity. Her voice grew harder. You abandoned us. Every single one of you. You had the numbers and the resources to help, but you lacked the courage. You let billions die because you were too afraid to fight. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted. And then I did something desperate. Talora continued. I contacted the quarantine system of Sol 3. I sent a message to the species that this council had isolated for 10,000 years because you considered them too dangerous. I asked the monsters for help. She gestured to the humans behind her. And they came. Within days they assembled a fleet and crossed the galaxy to fight for people they had never met. They asked nothing in return. They demanded no payment or territory or resources. They simply came because we needed help and they could provide it. 4,000 of them died liberating my world. 4,000 beings who volunteered to sacrifice their lives for strangers. I have spoken with the families of some of those soldiers. Do you know what they told me? They told me they were proud. Proud that their children died protecting innocent lives. Proud that humanity answered the call. Talora turned to face the council president directly. You called them monsters. You isolated them because their capacity for violence frightened you. But what I witnessed was not monstrous. It was magnificent. The humans did not enjoy killing the swarm. They did it because it needed to be done. And when the fighting was over, they stayed to help us rebuild. They share their food with our hungry and their medicine with our sick. They weep when they find bodies in the ruins. She stepped back from the platform. Monsters do not weep for strangers. Monsters do not risk everything for people they have never met. You were wrong about the humans. They are not the villains of this galaxy. They are exactly what we needed and exactly what we were too cowardly to be ourselves. The chamber erupted in murmurs and whispers as delegates discussed what they had heard. The council president called for order and then addressed the human delegation. Ambassador Vasquez, the humans have heard the accusations against the Galactic Council. Do you wish to respond? Elena Vasquez stepped forward. She was an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything. She had spent 40 years as a diplomat on Earth, and she had been chosen for this moment because she understood both the power and the danger of words. Honored delegates, she said, her voice warm but firm, we do not come seeking revenge or demanding apologies. The past cannot be changed, and dwelling on it serves no one. We come seeking understanding. You isolated our world because you feared us, and we understand that fear. Human history is full of violence and cruelty. We have done terrible things to each other, and we are not proud of all our past. You looked at our worst moments and concluded that we were dangerous. You were not entirely wrong. She paused and smiled slightly. But you made a mistake. You looked only at our darkness and missed our light. Humans are capable of great violence, but we are also capable of great love. We fight fiercely, but we also protect fiercely. The same aggression that makes us terrifying in war makes us unstoppable in defense of those we care about. When we received the Velas distress call, there was no debate about whether we should help. There was only discussion of how quickly we could arrive. That is who we are. When someone cries out in pain, we answer. When someone faces injustice, we stand with them. When bullies prey upon the weak, we make the bullies stop. She looked directly at the assembled delegates. You have spent 100,000 years building a civilization based on peace and cooperation. That is admirable. But you forgot that peace must sometimes be defended. You created a galaxy where the kind and the gentle flourish, but you left them without protection against those who would prey upon them. The Craxian swarm has terrorized this galaxy for 10,000 years because no one stood against them. Dozens of civilizations were destroyed because no one was willing to fight. That ends now. Her voice hardened. Humanity is officially requesting that the quarantine of Sol 3 be lifted. We wish to join the Galactic Council not as conquerors, but as guardians. We will continue to do what we do best. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. The Council President considered her words. And if we refuse? If we maintain the quarantine, Elena smiled again, then we will return to Earth and mind our own business. We will not force ourselves upon you. But know this, we have already received 17 additional distress calls from species facing threats they cannot handle alone. If those calls keep coming, we will keep answering. With or without your approval, humanity will be what it has always been. A species that stands for the helpless. The vote was held 3 hours later. It was not unanimous, but it was decisive. By a margin of 6,000 to 2,000, the Galactic Council voted to lift the quarantine on Sol 3 and extend an invitation for humanity to join as a full member species. The celebration on Valathos Prime lasted for weeks. Valath and humans danced together in the streets of cities that were still being rebuilt. Children who had hidden in underwater sanctuaries learned to play games with soldiers who had fought through fire and blood to save them. Bonds were formed that would last for generations, but the most important moment came quietly. Away from the celebrations, Ambassador Talora found Colonel Marcus, sitting alone on a hill overlooking what had once been the capital city. He was watching the sunset with tired eyes. His wounds had healed, but the weight on his shoulders seemed heavier than ever. "You saved us," Talora said, sitting beside him. "Why do you look so sad?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I was thinking about the soldiers we lost. 4,000 men and women who will never go home. I knew most of them by name. I sent many of them to their deaths personally. They died heroes." Talora offered. "They died young," Marcus replied. "Most of them had not even lived 30 years. They had families and dreams and futures that will never happen. I cannot celebrate while I carry their names in my heart." Talora reached out and placed her webbed hand on his. "On Valathos we have a saying, the brightest stars are those who burn themselves to light the way for others. Your soldiers are stars now. Their light will guide us forever." Marcus finally smiled. "We have a similar saying on Earth. Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. I just never expected to find friends on the other side of the galaxy." He stood and helped Talora to her feet. "Come on, we have a lot of work to do." Your world needs rebuilding, and I hear there are more calls for help coming in every day. Apparently, word has spread that the Deathworlders are willing to fight for anyone who asks. Will you answer those calls too? Marcus looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there were species facing extinction, peoples crying out for salvation, civilizations waiting for someone brave enough to stand between them and the darkness. Always, he said. That is what humans do, and across the galaxy, a new legend began to spread. A legend of a quarantined world filled with terrifying creatures who would somehow become the greatest heroes the universe had ever known. A legend of monsters who were not monsters at all, but guardians wearing the skin of predators. If you are lost, the legend said. If you are alone. If all hope seems gone. Call the Deathworlders, call the humans, they will answer.